Alright, so I made a box for this 12-inch Pioneer Premiere, and when I went to listen to it, which is weird because I listened to it before and actually sounded totally fine, but something must have happened while it was sitting, and it started to have a bit of a distortion to it. Anyway, I tear it apart, took the coil out, actually threw the coil away already, but noticed that the varnish on the coil was worn out. Of course, that's going to happen with age and heat. But I do have a new coil coming in. I ordered it from Springfield Speakers. Whether or not it works, I don't know. Coil's not here yet, but I just thought I would show basically my attack plan with this thing. What you notice is I took this off, this I guess gasket type thing that goes around the surround. Anyway, I took it off because I was going to go about it from the top, but as soon as I noticed the suspension, I knew that would not be a very good idea because I don't want to damage the suspension in this thing. They don't have recone kits. Anyway, so my other idea was going from the bottom. Anyway, the way I did it, of course, is you take this whole plate off, kind of expose all of this, and this used to be like a little wire grill thing that I had to really work at just to get off. Like, I ended up cutting it, prying at it, everything, and thankfully I didn't damage the suspension either. Anyway, yeah, you're able to unbolt the motor from the subwoofer and it'll kind of pop right off. I mean, they do have a bit of glue, but considering how old this thing was, the glue didn't really stay very tacky. But yeah, I was able to take this top off, and then I was over a bit of effort. Oh, by the way, taking these things apart, heat gun's your best friend, especially with this dust cap. This dust cap is the biggest pain to pull off. But I did get it off, did a lot of work, attacked it with a wire brush, etc. Hopefully I actually have it bored out a bit to where I could get the new coil, and if not, I'm probably just going to go get a sanding bell thing for a drill and kind of go at it with that. But once I get the coil here, I'll do more of an update on how this is all playing out. Alright, so the coil finally arrived. I got a little bit of ahead of myself and just went away and started putting it back together before I started recording. Anyways, you can see there's the coil. You got to put the coil in first before you put the magnet back on, just because there's no way to put it in through the top, at least the way I did it. I'm using these little plastic things. I've actually had recone kits from these guys before, and they sent these little plastic slips with the recone kits, specifically the Alpine Type R ones, and they work really well, so I tend to keep using them. I've used rubbing alcohol to kind of clean out the inside of the magnet of any gunk or anything like that, as well as like tape, etc. And then what I'm going to do, since I tore this surround off a bit, I'm just going to go ahead and re-glue the surround back on and get this kind of centered before I glue the coil back on. So after that gets all dry and I verify that the coil isn't going to rub in its current placement, then I'm going to go ahead and glue the coil on, and I will get back to you when that happens. Alright, so I let the glue sit for a bit as far as the surround goes, and it's pretty on there. Of course, not completely cured. Now what I'm left to do, or what I have left to do, is to get this all sorted out and make sure that it's actually centered. So let me see if I can get this together. Alright, well, so pretty much what I'm going to do in this situation is just kind of push on the cone in here. If I tell if I can hear any rubs. There's nothing.
pretty centered on there. And there isn't a lot of clearance. I don't know if you can tell, but there is very, very minimal clearance using this coil. So, unfortunately, the way they build this subwoofer is it actually has a pretty nice spot to mount the coil so that it stays straight. Kind of help reduce that coil wobble. So, I'm going to get some super glue. Ran out of the stuff I normally use, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this. I've used it on a lot of other speakers and it seems to work out pretty well. As for this application, I have no idea, considering it's a higher powered build. Then of course some activator spray. Oh, and I don't know if you noticed, but I did take out those the plastic spacer things just to, because I can't really tell if it's really centered with them in, and if I did happen to get it centered with them in, to test it, pulling them out, the friction between the spacers and the coil would cause enough rebbing to kind of offset the coil anyway, so I'm just going to do it without them in there. Anyway, I'm going to let that dry a bit, and then I'm going to do one more round of kind of cleaning out in between the coil and the magnet, just to make sure there's nothing else in there while I was doing the gluing. And then I'm actually going to flip it over and I'm going to glue the coil on the other side of the subwoofer too, because if you look in here, so you have this top part. Anyway, it actually goes down a bit, so right there, if I can get it to focus. Camera stopped for some reason, but there's a 25-pound weight I was using to kind of press on this ring to make sure it was sitting really tight on there. But as I was saying, I'm gluing down here too. I'm going to flip the subwoofer upside down and get some glue on that to make sure that this coil is really in there. And what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to take another one of these, just like a nice little clean one. This is 99% isopropyl alcohol. Whether or not this is a good idea to use, don't ask me. Probably not for the varnish on the coil, so be a little gentle. But yeah, all I'm going to do is basically just kind of get a nice little layer on there. Kind of see, yeah. And then just go through and kind of work it in. And really try to do a good job of making sure there is nothing here, because if there is any kind of dust or tiny particle or anything that's going to rub in between the magnet and the coil, you will hear it as the subwoofer plays. So pretty much did that. Again, I'm going to kind of let it dry a little bit, and then I'm going to move on to soldering the voice coils to the terminals that are already on the subwoofer, because since I didn't take the suspension off, those are totally fine. So why not use them? A good thing to check, like in this particular case, is which ones you're positive and negative. I mean, after you put it all together, there's also a way you could kind of put a slight burst current through it, like a nice little 12-volt signal, just to see which way the subwoofer moves per coil. But in this particular case, after testing it, you'll find that this back one right here and this one are your two positives for your separate coils, and then your negatives. Whereas the voice coil that I ordered, the aftermarket one, is not set up like that. This one's your positive and this one's your positive, or vice versa. I don't know. I'd have to test it out for sure. I can't remember. But anyway, with that said, you're going to have to be extra careful and actually label this. Don't use the stock label of which one's positive and negative. You'll end up distorting, if not ruining, your brand new coil that you put in the subwoofer. So keep that in mind. Anyway, we're going to get this all soldered and do a short little test run and see if it works out. Fingers crossed. So very important, before you solder, make sure that it's coming out right. I mean, of course, the solder is going to help give you a more solid contact, but make sure you're getting proper reading. So yeah, this one, even though they're connected, I'm just going to have to play with it a bit to kind of get it a little more solid, and then I'm going to go ahead and solder it to really make sure. So to kind of show you what I was talking about to identify positive and negative, you have a battery, 12 volts, extra battery maintainer, then of course you get your speaker wire, or whatever kind of wire you want to use. Of course, this lettering's the positive. Anyway,
what you do is this. So the positive is to the left. According to this, this should be proper. So what I'm going to do is going to touch the terminals and watch the speaker move. It's actually going backwards. So the way I thought the coil was set up is actually incorrect. In this case, this one's wrong. So I'm going to have to swap the positive and negative labeling for this. I'll show you again. See how it goes in? Yeah, you want it to go out if it's actually proper. I'm going to do it for this side. Same thing. See how it's going out? So in this case, this left terminal is in fact the positive, while the right one is negative. So I'll label that and then move on to testing. So I have it loaded in a box. I paired it with this 2-channel DS18. Does 300 watts RMS per channel, and I'm running each coil on their own channel. Anyway, hear what this sounds like. I'm playing a bass test song, so as soon as this starts going. So this seems to be doing really well on the lows. Oh, here, let me turn it down. My speakers are getting all messed up. Yeah, some cheap home audio, but anyway, not even use the highest quality input, but what I've noticed is compared to what it did sound like before, the lows seem to be hitting a lot harder. I don't know if it just has something to do with the weight of the coil or what, but it's doing really well in the lows. The box is tuned to 35 hertz though, so it's kind of expected, but it did taper off dramatically on the highs. I did a terrible job gluing this, but it's on there. Certainly not coming off anytime soon. Yeah, works pretty well actually. I was going into this not even expecting it to turn out, because never reconed or recoiled one of these ever, and I couldn't find any videos on doing it, so I decided to make one myself. A couple things I forgot to mention as well is this. I actually had to cut an Allen wrench down just to get to the bolts and the magnet. You're going to have to do that depending on what your tools are, but this is what I did. Just get that magnet off. I also glued, put some glue on the, I don't have the subwoofer out to show you, but I did put some glue on the bolts that hold the magnet to the basket, or the motor to the basket. What else is there? Of course, areas of improvement would be using a little bit higher quality glue instead of just some generic Rapid Fuse or whatever the hell I was using. I'm trying to think of anything else. Of course, don't rip this off next time if I ever do one of these again. Oh, and this thing, I'm probably going to be a little more gentle on taking the dust cap off since I really messed it up this time around. That's why the glue looks horrible, just to get the thing on there and sealed. And what else is there? That's all I can think of right now. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but yeah. Recoiled Pioneer TS-W3001D2, and it seems to be working like a charm. I've actually been playing it a bit with this amp, so it's not like that was just right off the bat playing it. It's been played for a bit and it seems to still be holding up. I'm going to do a couple more tests to make sure it can actually handle it, and then probably go from there. Anyway, thanks for watching. Go ahead and use, I know I'm streaming YouTube, probably not the best practice, but that's okay. Anyway, I'm going to use this. This is actually a really good little bass sweep I've used more than one time, because what it does is relative to the time in the video, that's the frequency it's playing. So, with that said, we'll go ahead and do this. noticed that, at least on the previous video, the subwoofer did sound a little funky on a certain range. It's not really that bad if you're listening to it in person. I mean, it certainly isn't flawless. This is me kind of just doing a little edit, but it's not flawless. It still works. It's, of course, not perfect, but not bad for a $35 voice coil and some half-assed work on the recoil. But yeah.